George Harvey Strait, born on May 18, 1952, in the small town of Poteet, Texas, is widely known as the King of Country, a man whose voice and songs have become synonymous with authentic country music. However, behind the fame and sold-out concerts, George Strait lived a life that few people ever knew. For more than 3 decades, he maintained a careful boundary between the public persona everyone admired and the private world he held close to his heart. This hidden side of his life was built on family, loyalty, grief, and the quiet determination to live according to his values, even when fame demanded something different. Understanding George Strait's life means beginning with the place where he grew up, the people who shaped him, and the early experiences that planted the seeds for both his music and his private principles. George was raised on a cattle farm near Poteet, in the nearby town of Pearsall, Texas. Life on a farm was far from easy. It required discipline, hard work, and responsibility from a very young age. George and his brother learned to wake up early, tend to the animals, and help with chores, all while keeping up with schoolwork. The rural landscape of Texas was not just a backdrop for his childhood. It was a teacher that imparted patience, perseverance, and humility. These values became inseparable from George's personality, and later deeply influenced the themes and authenticity of his music. When his parents divorced during his childhood, George and his brother were raised by their father, a junior high school math teacher who balanced teaching with the daily responsibilities of running the farm. The combination of education and manual labor gave George a sense of structure and order, while also teaching him the meaning of hard work and accountability. Growing up in this environment instilled in him a quiet determination to succeed while remaining grounded, a trait that would carry through every stage of his life. Music slowly entered George's life. Unlike many young musicians who are captivated by instant fame or modern trends, George was drawn to the traditional sounds of country music. He listened to artists like Hank Williams, Merle Haggard, and George Jones, finding comfort in songs that told honest stories about life, love, and loss. While some teenagers in the late 1960s pursued rock and pop music, George Strait found himself captivated by melody, storytelling, and the straightforward honesty of classic country lyrics. In high school, he briefly experimented with a rock and roll garage band, trying the styles that were popular among his peers, but he always returned to the sound that resonated with his heart. Country music for George was more than entertainment. It was a reflection of life in its rawest form. It reflected real life and carried the values he had learned on the farm: honesty, integrity, and emotional truth. After high school, George enrolled in college, but his plans were interrupted when he joined the United States Army in the early 1970s. He was stationed in Hawaii, far from Texas, which gave him an opportunity to experience the world beyond his small-town roots. During his service, he joined an Army-sponsored country band called Rambling Country. Performing for fellow servicemen and local audiences, George had his first real taste of life on stage. These early performances confirmed that music was not just a hobby, but a calling. He began to recognize that his voice and his style could connect with people, even outside the familiar landscapes of Texas. When he returned home and resumed college, George brought with him not only musical skills, but also a deepened sense of discipline and responsibility learned from military life. He approached both music and life with a seriousness that came from experience, understanding that success would require hard work, patience, and dedication. In December 1971, at the age of 19, George married his high school sweetheart, Norma Strait. Their marriage was built before fame and fortune, founded on mutual respect, shared history, and unwavering trust. Unlike many celebrity relationships that struggle under the glare of public attention, George and Norma's partnership was steady, private, and deeply committed. Their early years together were marked by modesty and responsibility, including the birth of their first child, Jennifer, in 1972. Fatherhood arrived early, and George had to balance the demands of raising a family with military service, education, and the uncertain beginnings of his music career. Life was not glamorous. It was full of responsibilities, long hours, and difficult choices. Yet, these challenges strengthened George's devotion to family and solidified his values. Family was not something he prioritized when convenient. It was the foundation upon which he built his life. As the 1970s progressed, George began to take music more seriously, performing in small venues and traveling long distances to pursue his passion. His early career involved modest pay, long drives, and the challenge of establishing himself in a competitive industry. Yet, through it all, Norma remained a constant support, providing stability without seeking attention. She avoided the spotlight entirely, preferring privacy and the quiet rhythm of family life. George's respect for her boundaries reflected his own approach to life. Personal matters were sacred, and fame did not grant the right to intrude upon them. Their marriage, rooted in trust and mutual respect, became a rare constant in an industry known for volatility and short-lived relationships. In 1981, George and Norma welcomed their son, George Bubba Strait Jr. The addition of a second child further solidified the family unit, just as George's career began gaining significant momentum. Despite the pressures of rising fame, George made deliberate choices that prioritized home over Hollywood and personal relationships over public life. He chose family dinners, quiet evenings, and meaningful presence in his children's lives, setting an example of integrity that would later become a hallmark of his music. George Strait's story at this stage was one of balance, pursuing a professional dream while maintaining a personal life grounded in values, loyalty, and humility. Tragedy struck on June 25, 1986, when George and Norma's daughter, Jennifer, died in a car accident in San Marcos, Texas. At just 13 years old, Jennifer's death was sudden and devastating. None of the occupants were wearing seatbelts, a fact that deepened the heartbreak for the family. In an instant, the foundation of George's personal life, the quiet center of family stability, was shattered. Those closest to the family described a period of profound grief, during which George withdrew from the public eye to protect his family and navigate their sorrow privately. Unlike many public figures, George chose not to process tragedy under media scrutiny. His music became his outlet, expressing pain and emotion subtly rather than through words. This period of grief marked the beginning of the double life George Strait would live: a public figure admired for his music, and a private man managing unimaginable loss far from the spotlight. In the wake of Jennifer's death, George and Norma co-founded the Jennifer Lynn Strait Foundation in 1987. Their mission was simple yet profound: to support children's charities and provide aid to those facing hardship. True to their values, the foundation operated quietly, without seeking attention or acclaim. Over the years, it has donated millions of dollars, creating a living legacy for Jennifer, and demonstrating that even profound loss can be transformed into compassion and action. For George Strait, this was not a public image effort. It was a private commitment to honor his daughter's memory while helping children in need. Even as George's career continued to rise, this duality defined his life. On stage, he was the icon of country music, performing sold-out shows and recording chart-topping hits. Offstage, he was a husband, father, and private man, navigating grief, maintaining personal boundaries, and building a quiet legacy of service and loyalty. His early life, shaped by hard work, discipline, and love for family, created the foundation for a life lived with integrity, resilience, and a profound sense of purpose. As George Strait entered the 1980s, his career began to gain serious momentum. The 1981 release of his first major album, Straight Country, introduced him to a wider audience, showcasing the smooth voice and classic country style that would become his trademark. Unlike many artists of the time who chased trends, Strait remained faithful to traditional country sounds, emphasizing heartfelt lyrics and storytelling. His performances were understated yet powerful, resonating with audiences who appreciated sincerity over spectacle. While other musicians sought the glitz and glamour of show business, George prioritized consistency, discipline, and professionalism. Every note he sang, and every show he performed, reflected years of hard work and a dedication to the craft that went far beyond seeking fame or applause. Despite his growing success, George Strait maintained an unwavering commitment to his private life. He consistently drew clear boundaries between his professional and personal worlds. Long drives between venues, early mornings, and late-night shows became routine. But George never allowed the pressures of fame to overshadow his family. Norma remained a constant presence, quietly supporting her husband while shielding their children from the public eye. The choices George made during this time were deliberate. He prioritized stability at home over the fleeting excitement of celebrity, valuing moments with his family more than the accolades and attention that came with a rising music career. This approach was not always easy, especially in an industry that often demanded openness, publicity, and exposure. Yet George understood that his family's well-being mattered far more than any headline or interview. In 1986, the Straits' lives were shaken by unimaginable tragedy. Their daughter Jennifer, just 13 years old, died in a car accident in San Marcos, Texas. Jennifer had been riding in a vehicle that lost control and crashed violently. None of the occupants were wearing seatbelts. The accident instantly stole a child from her parents, leaving a void that could never be filled. George and Norma retreated into privacy, refusing to allow the media or fans to intrude upon their grief. For George, this loss became the defining moment in his private life, shaping how he would approach both fame and family for decades to come. Instead of seeking public sympathy, he chose silence, reflection, and emotional restraint. Music became his way of expressing grief, allowing audiences to connect with emotion without needing words to explain his pain. In the aftermath of Jennifer's death, George and Norma co-founded the Jennifer Lynn Strait Foundation in 1987. The foundation was designed to honor their daughter's memory by supporting children in need. Its operations were quiet, reflecting the family's preference for privacy. Rather than seeking publicity or media attention, the Straits focused on meaningful impact, providing aid for children facing illness, hardship, or instability, particularly in Texas communities close to their hearts. Over the years, the foundation has donated millions of dollars, creating a living legacy for Jennifer, and demonstrating that even the deepest sorrow could be transformed into service, compassion, and positive action. This commitment to charity was one of the first glimpses of George Strait's double life, a private, deeply meaningful existence, beyond the fame and spotlight that most fans only associated with his music. While George's public persona as a music icon grew, he continued to live with a sense of discretion that few celebrities could manage. The 1980s and 1990s brought increasing fame, sold-out concerts, and countless awards. Yet George rarely granted interviews, avoided talk shows, and refrained from sharing personal details publicly. He performed music that resonated with audiences worldwide, but his private life remained guarded. This restraint was not a sign of detachment. It was a deliberate choice to protect his family and preserve the sacredness of home. Even in the face of enormous public interest, George Strait refused to compromise his values for attention or career advancement. His quiet dignity and refusal to overshare became part of the mystique that surrounded him, adding a layer of authenticity that drew even more respect from fans and peers alike. Throughout his career, George Strait faced more personal loss. In April 2009, his older brother Buddy Strait passed away at the age of 58. Buddy had been a constant presence in George's life, sharing childhood experiences on the farm and understanding the man George had become before fame. Losing a sibling who had witnessed his formative years was profoundly painful. Yet George processed this grief privately, as he always had, avoiding public statements and choosing to grieve at home with his family. These losses reinforced George's belief that family and personal integrity mattered far more than public attention or recognition. He continued to perform, tour, and record music, but his perspective on life and success was deeply shaped by the understanding that personal relationships outweighed career milestones.